Today on the Idiot's Guide, have you ever been at a social gathering and realized halfway through that you completely missed the point of that one joke? Or if you've wondered why your friend can talk for hours about 80s cartoons, but struggles with eye contact? Well, look no further. Today, we're talking about autism, a different but totally fascinating way of experiencing the world. What does autism actually look like? Spoiler, it's mostly never obvious. How can you support your loved ones? And how can you be mindful without being, well, too mindful? So whether you're neurotypical, neurodiverse, or just trying to figure out why your cat looks at you like that, let's talk about autism. I'm your host, Adam Richardson, aka the Profit Hacker, and I'm joined by the man in charge, Mr. Joe Haslam. Welcome to the Idiot's Guide. I think that kind of getting this started is... the easiest way for me to explain it is I don't have autism. Maybe I do. I don't know. There's a chance. But at the same time, I do recognize that my son, my oldest son, he does have ASD, Autism Spectrum Disorder, whatever they call it. I don't know. Like some people just dropped the D and just said AS, and I was like, he has a big. No, never mind. But. It's you know, like misunderstanding like social cues at different things, different events, recognizing some of those things like the disorganization or the chaos about normal things. I think is really autism's kind of a unique thing to really prescribe. It's unique in the sense that it's not obvious, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's also something that's like it's almost it's quirky in like you're weird or you're odd, you're a strange duck. And since having my son diagnosed with it, I've grown to appreciate it in a different way. But you know, like I don't know, like
There's a term, you know, some like it, some don't, but it came from the autism community. We call ourselves Neuro-Spicy.
Neuro-Spicy, I like that.
So it's that spicy idea. It's that, you know, kind of like what you were talking about. That it's hard to describe autism.
It is.
I think
it's
spicy
difficult.
is a good way of doing it.
I think you know, like using the word spectrum. I mean, over the years, obviously, it's evolved into now just a spectrum. It's you register on this whether it's extreme or high functioning on either end of that. And my son is high functioning autistic. You wouldn't know unless he disclosed that information to you. But you know, it's kind of like sitting in a conversation and realizing 5 minutes in that you've really missed the memo on the unspoken social rule that's going on. And everybody else is really just kind of like trying to lay on the cues, going like, hey, knock it off. And you just are oblivious to this. And that's kind of how an individual with autism may present in that kind of a situation.
Yeah.
So, you know, here in this episode, we want to kind of talk about autism awareness. And like I said, it's really hard to define. It's a spectrum. It has everything from really extreme autism, where you have very limited motor function and skill.
Now, when you say that, we do have to be clear.
Yes.
Because this is a big misunderstanding within the world at large, is when we're talking about the autism spectrum, and we say that he has a lot of autism or a little bit of autism, or is very autistic or not very autistic, all we're talking about here, and this is very important, is how much help is needed. They're
Right.
functioning for normal society, okay? So when we're talking about they are extremely autistic, that is simply saying that they are in need of a lot of extra support. Or not very autistic, they don't need a lot of support. Okay, that's the spectrum, is how much support is needed. Because the reason I say this is because there's a lot of people who think, oh, you're not very autistic. And they think that the spectrum means that you're either, your traits are either a little autistic or a lot autistic. That is not what it means to be on the spectrum.
And I think that it's hard because I advocate for my son in school, and he has obviously a more specific educational program that is geared towards the way that he learns, and it's not like he can't sit through a class or a subject matter. It's the way he processes that makes that classroom insanely boring.
Yeah, less effective.
Yeah.
He needs different kinds of support to be able to do that. If someone is autistic, they are autistic. There is no such thing as you're a little bit autistic or a lot autistic.
Right, yeah.
The spectrum that we're talking about is the amount of support that is needed for someone who is autistic. And that, when I watch a lot of videos on Autism Support, people who are autistic talking about things, or contradictions to, oh, you're not that autistic. Those kinds of videos I really, really abhor. That seems to be the fundamental misunderstanding about the word spectrum.
Yeah.
Is that you're just a little autistic or you're a lot autistic. That is not what the spectrum means. What it means is how much support you need as an autistic person. And so me being autistic, I'm high functioning autistic, I don't need a lot of that support. I am able to function in society fairly well. As we go along, I will share some stories of what I've been through as an autistic person and some of the situational problems. But in general, I am able to function, I am high masking, but I am able to function fairly well in society. Other people who are non-communicative, they don't have verbal capabilities, they aren't able to function as well in normal society, they are more needs-based autism. That's the spectrum.
They're still autistic.
Yes, they are still autistic. It is not a matter of how autistic are you, it's how much support you need.
So let's identify, I think, some key behaviors that you can look for. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have autism or an individual has autism, but they are some things that you can keep an eye on that might be indicators. Probably the first one is social communication challenges. My son, going through elementary school age, I used to call him the space invader, and because he just never got people's cues about getting up in people's space. He was always super friendly. He was kind of touchy-feely, but like you couldn't hug him. Like he would not like that. But he would just be all excited about somebody and not matching their energy. And they're like, "Would you go away?" Like just come unglued on him, and he wouldn't recognize what he did wrong. He wouldn't see that they were uncomfortable with the space that he was invading, And the other one would be like eye contact, like not making eye contact. My other son, he's not autistic, but he hates this. Is like if I have a conversation, kind of like we're having right now, but if I turn and I'm looking this way and I side eye converse with him, he gets really uncomfortable. Like it's just completely weird because he can't maintain the eye contact, and I'm like, all right, maybe you are autistic. Just kidding.
and the eye contact is one of my big ones. I have a hard time making any eye contact at all. I've gotten better at it, but my eye contact, so if you watch these videos, if you go back and watch the videos on YouTube, if you're just listening to it, you will see me a lot of times, I have a hard time even looking at the camera because that's still looking at someone. But even when I look at you, what I'm looking at is I actually look right here.
Huh.
And so I don't make eye contact with people, and if I do, I find that I make way too much eye contact. And so I'll be looking at someone and it's like over intense. And then I start to notice after a while the look on the other person's face, suddenly they're looking a little awkward. I'm like, oh crap, I've looked at them for too long. Now I've got to stop looking at them. But I can't stop looking at them.
The conversation is over and you're still staring, you know?
And so I get into this feedback loop of, what am I supposed to do? No! And that's the autism brain, is it's just, you get into these states of just craziness. The worst thing is when I'm talking to women, okay? Because, women have a hard time with men not looking them in the eyes, that men will look at their chests. And so for me, the hardest thing is, because I'm autistic, I get very awkward if I look women in the eyes with anyone. So I look down. Well, now I'm looking down when I'm talking to a woman, I look like I'm looking at their chest. And I'm not. I'm just trying not to make eye contact. So I end up going like this the whole time. Like trying to make no eye contact. Eye contact, no eye contact. No, I'm looking at the chest. No, eye contact. I can't do that. And the eye contact is one of those big things for me.
I mean, it could be worse. Like, you could be like the character on South Park that throws up every time the girl says hi to him. So, yeah.
So yeah, it's just one of those things. The eye contact is a big one for
well, generally, reading social cues is an art form. Actually, honestly, most people are terrible at it. But I think also it kind of develops into the possibility of it, being. I guess you get better at reading some of those social cues. You get better at understanding when something is uncomfortable, or staring at their chest, staring at their eyes, staring at their chest.
And that, as you go along in life, this is why it's a lot easier to recognize these symptoms in kids, because they haven't learned how to mask yet.
Yeah.
And so masking is the hiding of your autistic traits in order to look and function normal. Normal being society's view of normal, so normal social behavior. Acting like this, not making eye contact, that's normal for an autistic person. And so when I say normal, I'm talking about normal social function. Mm-hmm. For society at large. And so you learn how to mask, and you learn how to hide these traits, which is in and of itself a problem for people who are autistic, because it adds to the stress. But so a lot of times you'll see flashes of these little behaviors when their masking comes down.
Yeah.
And you'll see some of these things come out. And so if you're looking at someone, if you're looking for these signs, it's hard to find it, because a lot of adults are high masking.
My son has moments that are like that he's done really, really well with masking, but it also it's taxing on him for that. Like that's probably the biggest challenge for him, is he comes out of that super exhausted because of it. But the other thing that is, for me, I can recognize this with my son, is this kind of repetitive behaviors or intense focus on specific things. Like, and it's sometimes it's ridiculous. It's a color of a shirt. Yeah. Sometimes it's like a task that they're trying to do, or it's right now my son is he's trying to basically learn. He's like learning a video game, and instead of it just being like, oh, I'm just going to play along and play this video game, no, he has to master this thing. So it is so focused, and it's rock bending, I don't know what it is. It's a game that's on a VR headset, so he's downstairs in our house, VR headset on, moving his arms around like this, and he's catapulting rocks at an opponent, and I'm like, this is not a skill that has any life application whatsoever, and you're trying to master this? This is why. Yeah. But it literally is the fact that it's fixating on particular things and not deviating from that at all costs, you know?
Yeah, one of my big ones. So I follow a channel that's just recently started. It's a husband and wife couple that talk a lot about autism issues, and this is a great channel. But one, they're talking about similar things like this, and I actually posted on that. I rarely post, but post a comment. But I posted a comment about this, and I got a lot of people that do this same thing. So I thought it was great. So I play Pokemon. So it's a fun way to kind of veg out and escape, but you know, the old Pokemon games. What I do is I will spend a month researching the best Pokemon team. So I will go through, find the best stats, find the best combination, look at which is the best way to beat it, the most efficient way, so instead of having 6 Pokemon, you do it with 4. And do all this intense research for like a month before I even pick up and open the game. And then I will play the game, and everything about that game is just what I had planned to accomplish that. And so the game itself is secondary to all of the research I did to find the best route for playing the game. And what was really surprising when I posted this is that a lot of people commented back that, yeah, this is exactly what I do. And it's just that intense focus on that subject.
Yeah, I mean, my son with Zelda, he had, for a moment, he had to just be able to master going through Zelda and doing that. And I find that, like, even for me, and I reference video games because I enjoy this, but I do some very similar things. Like, I won't stop until I have, like, fully, you know, completed something.
Yeah.
You know? So I'm right now I'm playing a game that's like just soaking up my brain. And it's Ghost Recon, and it's an open world model. You go through and you complete all of these missions, everything. There's so many options, there's so many directions you can go that literally you can't run out of missions.
Yeah.
And so being that it's such an open world model, you can play it forever and still have stuff to do. And so, like, I'm trying to do it all, you know. So yeah. I'm like, oh my gosh, like there's too much. I go to this area and there's more. Oh my gosh, you know. Yeah. So it's just it's kind of like this thing that if I'm not careful, I'll fixate, and then it'll consume my thoughts. Yeah. You know, and so. It's just one of those things. The other thing that I think is probably another big indicator is sensory sensitivities.
Oh yeah.
You know, textures, foods, the way food is made. My son doesn't like zucchini or mushrooms sometimes because the texture of how they taste. Mm-hmm. My daughter is showing some indicators, and so right now we're going through some testing to see what's going on, because there's some similarities that we're identifying. We're like, yeah, you're like, you and your brother set each other off, and I know why, you know. But there's different sounds, different, you know, bright lights, or different textures of materials, and you know how it feels. Definitely, you know, all of those things are all elements of indicators of, especially if you just like hard no, like I just won't. You have like just rejection of this stuff.
Yeah, for those of you that have been listening to the podcast for a long time, I talked, probably like a year ago on our podcast about the sensory sensitivities that I have. So all of my shirts, I have to buy one specific brand of shirt because I cannot wear any other brand of shirt. I have tried other brands. I have tried, you know, multiple different brands of shirts, different styles of shirts. I have to wear this one style of shirt because everything else just sets off my sensory issues. So I have to wear Van Heusen shirts.
Okay.
Not a sponsor, but those are the only shirts that I can wear because...
But if you would like to sponsor us, we are.
I don't know, maybe we'll do like a link on Amazon to buy Van Heusen shirts, I don't know. But Van Heusen shirts are, the material they're made of, the way that they're made, don't set off my sensory issues. My jeans, I have to wear a specific brand and style of jeans. And it messed me up. So it used to be Lee Dungaree's Relaxed Fit. No, Loose Fit. Loose Fit. They stopped making them. That sent me on a tailspin for a good year to try to find a new brand and style of jeans that would actually fit. So I have a new one. I can't remember what these are called. But these jeans I'm wearing, I have owned these jeans for 3 or 4 years. And I bought 4 pairs of these. I'm down to 2. But I have to wear these jeans because anything else just, it sets me off. And so it's those kinds of sensory issues that are very important for people with autism. And, you know, I'll share another story. I know we're kind of going off on this first topic here a bit, but there's a lot of things to talk about here, and other topics as we go along we'll discuss a little bit more. But years ago, I was going to an event with someone, and we were going downtown, and I was driving. Now, I don't ever recommend that if you're autistic that you go downtown to a major event and drive. This was before before we knew I was autistic, before any of that. But we went down there and trying to find a parking spot. And the traffic was really bad, so my sensory issues were already getting up. Lots of lights because it was night, so you know, stoplights and street lights and things like that. Lots of sounds, lots of, you know, honking horns and all this stuff. We finally get there, finally have a place to park after I already tried to back out once, but decided, okay, we can keep doing this. Finally find a place to park, and then we get out and there are just crowds and crowds and crowds of people. And so it's like, okay, I'm already intensely triggered by all these sensory inputs, but we're gonna keep going. So we go and we stand in line to get into the venue. And I am just on a razor's edge right there, just because of everything going on and standing in line. So I'm like, okay, I cannot stand in line. I've got to go stand off somewhere else. And so, because I just couldn't be around that many people. So I go, there's a spot where there's no one around. So I go and stand over there. Okay, I'm good over here. Well, there were a lot of people that were scalping tickets, or selling tickets, I guess. And so, young kid, probably around maybe 17 to 19, comes over and taps me on the shoulder. And I lost it at that point. I
just popped the bubble.
Yeah, it did. And I turned, don't touch me, and it's called an autistic meltdown.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of confusions about what autistic meltdowns are. They are not tantrums. These are the points where the brain no longer processes new information. It is like an extreme form of fight or flight.
It's interesting to me how, like, I think of some scenarios that I personally struggle with. I have clinical PTSD, so or CPTSD, complex PTSD. That is one of the things is like I think of the scenario you're talking about, really stressful and overwhelming, and I don't know if it's necessarily the same in the way that like somebody comes up and taps me, but one of the things that if I'm in a stressful environment or I'm kind of stressed I'm imbalanced in my stress levels at that moment, if my kids come and try and like hide behind me, so my older boys know not to do this because they've learned, because something happens, and when that happens and they play tease and they try to stay behind me, I get mad, and that's the easiest way for me to say it is I'm not nice about it. Like all of a sudden I'm like, don't you dare, like blah blah, and they're not threatening, they're just playing, but I have no understanding of that. At that moment I can't see them, I don't know what they're doing, and they're behind me. And so, like, usually if I'm in a public place, I find a corner so that nothing can be behind me, and that way I have nothing that can come up behind me or scare me or confront. It is all facing me, and I'm like, okay, and I definitely have a look on my face like you don't want to approach me, so I have no problems at that point. I've eliminated it all. But that's how best I could kind of empathize in that scenario, because I know how that feels to be so overwhelmed that you're just trying to one, control your own emotional response, but two, keep others from being affected by that.
Right.
You know?
And that's one thing that, with autism, there's no filter in the brain. So there's no, imagine listening to 20 different orchestras playing 20 different musical numbers. And that's what it's like to have autism. That's the best scenario that I can give to what it's like.
Yeah.
If there is no, so a neurotypical brain will filter out all the extraneous data, let it all go. It doesn't allow the brain to process it. An autistic brain doesn't have that.
Right.
Everything comes in.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter if the sound is coming from way across the street. It is the same as if it were right next to you, and you've got all these things coming in. And so when you get in that moment, the brain no longer is physically capable of processing new information, similar to trauma reactions, where the brain is so traumatized and triggered in that moment that it can no longer process new information, and it goes into that fight or flight mode. And that's what it's like with an autistic meltdown when you get overstimulated like that, is there's just too much coming in, and there's nothing in an autistic brain to filter it out.
What's interesting or fascinating about that is that, for my son is a good example of this. His information processing is like, his capacity is leaps and bounds above an active adult mind. So, and I always try to give the explanation of, like, if he's sitting in the classroom like a college professor giving a math equation on the board, he can sit in a space, be playing a game on his phone, and not doing any of the classwork, and then he'll ace the test. Because all of it's happening all at the same time, and his brain is capturing it all.
Yep.
And so that's a good description of that. 20 different orchestras playing 20 different songs, 20 different directions, all of the different pieces involved in that, and your brain is just absorbing it all.
Yep.
Instead of going like, okay, I'm going to pay attention to the harp on this one song, and you're like, your brain can focus on this one thing or zero in on a specific moment of that. That's the lacking of that is just like information by the fire hose instead of by the little drinking fountain that we normally process through.
Yeah, and as we get older, it's easier to mask those issues, which is why high masking is usually a problem with adults. Kids don't have that problem, which is why they get very, or don't have that ability to adapt. So they are very overwhelmed. You take them to a park and just suddenly all these sounds are coming in at a park. And a neurotypical brain filters out, the conversation that's happening across the park or the kid that's crying over there. Whereas the autistic kid, they are hearing everything as if it's right next to them. So they hear that conversation, they hear that kid screaming, they hear the ice cream truck, they hear the motorcycle revving as it's going down the street. All these different things. I've been there. All these things happen all at the same time, and it can just be overwhelming. So that's why, when you're talking about sensitivity of touch and things like that, any way that we can reduce that sensitivity allows us to be able to bear other things, which is why I wear a very specific wardrobe. I have to have specific shirts because it means that I can deal with other things a lot easier.
And I want to say, like, creature of habit is one thing, but this is like creature of habit on steroids, because you are very set in your ways, there are particular things in particular ways, in particular order, and, I think this kind of leads into the next section. So before I do that, I just kind of want to, mention, if you're enjoying the content, if it's something that you like what we're doing or what we're talking about, please don't forget to subscribe and join our awesome community. It's quick and it's easy, and you'll never miss out on the latest video that way. So hit that subscribe button now and let's grow together. I think, an important part about this is, like, let's talk a little bit about tips about how to support an autistic loved one, okay? Or, it doesn't have to be necessarily a loved one, but if you recognize, like, I work with you, and I recognize that there are things that I can apply in this setting the same as I do at home with my son who's diagnosed with autism. And so, you know, it doesn't necessarily universally apply, but these are some good tips to try to kind of understand. Tip number one is be patient and understanding in their communication style. You know, one of the things, I guess, you know, as an example is if they're not into hugs, don't force it. Don't be like, God, you want a hug? You want a hug? You know, but at the same time, you know, think of it like they're cats. Okay, cats, they're going to come to you when they want to come to you. Other than that, don't approach them or you're going to get claws. You know?
That is a very good analogy.
But the idea is that, you know, it's don't try to invade. It's like the person who came over and just tapped you on the shoulder. Like, they didn't mean anything by it.
No.
They meant absolutely well, but that exposure to just the contact right there is not something that you're welcoming at that moment. And I have to be careful with my son because I have to wake him up every single morning, basically, because he won't get up, you know. And I have to wake him up numerous times every single morning. But I want to be careful how I go in and I put contact on him. Like, there are, you know, like I will usually have my hand gently on his shoulder, and that is it. Like, and I don't rub, I just, hey, dude, you know, if he doesn't want to wake up, I'm just kind of like little bit of movement, not a lot, not shaking awake, you know, just getting him going, but it's just letting him know I have a contact, but it's not like a hug, it's not an embrace. I let that happen when he wants that to happen.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah, and that goes back to that sensory issue. There's a lot of issues that go along with it, but if they're overwhelmed in the moment, you have no idea.
Right.
Like that guy who came and tapped me on the shoulder. He had no idea that I was on a razor's edge there because of everything else that was going on.
Right.
And so you come and try to give them a hug. They may be okay with it because it's been a low stress day, a low sensory input day, and they're more willing to it. But on high sensory input days, they may not be.
Yeah.
And so that's where just be open to that, as well as be open to if they get overwhelmed, just know where it's coming from.
Yeah.
You know, don't. It's not personal. They're not mad at you. They're overwhelmed.
So the other one is tip number 2 is offer consistency or routine. Consistency and routine is like, even to the fact of, you know, like if you said you're going to be here at this time, be here at this time. Okay. Now, granted, I think, you know, over the years, you're not as strict on this aspect of it. Yeah. Maybe that's something that's developed over the years as you've gotten a little bit better masking in that expectation. But my daughter, who's 8 years old, who is exhibiting some of this stuff, if it's not like a routine set, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to get you going at this time so you have this much time to be able to leave at this time, it's incredibly difficult because the moment that gets disrupted, it's the end of the world. That nothing is right at that point. You can't get your shoes right, you can't pick out the right pair of socks, you can't, you know, like, it doesn't matter what it is, the wrong cereal, the wrong everything about your day. And it's kind of like, you know, imagine living in a world where the most comfortable thing is knowing your coffee is always brewed at 7:02 a.m. I was like, man, that sounds absolutely magnificent. If I knew my coffee was brewed and at 7:02 I could wake up and have a cup of coffee, like, don't mess with that timeline. Don't.
Yeah.
Like, that's to the T. Now, yeah, I mean, like, in this office space, I think about that. I was like, my life is so much chaos because of the fact that I keep my kids on a routine.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just one of these, and if that routine gets messed up, it is devastating because, and even if it's not a written routine, so an autistic brain will wake up in the morning and have everything outlined and designed for the day.
Yeah.
Whether it's written somewhere or not, that is their plan. And that's the hardest thing for autistic, or for parents of autistic kids, is the parent has a plan, and it's probably a loose plan, but then the kid has a plan. Maybe it's something that the parent said previously, maybe it's just something that they see, this is how my day is going to go.
Yes.
And then halfway through the day, the parent says, we're doing something else. That just completely disrupts everything.
Well, and I have this
And they
often.
have no idea.
I have this often with my son because, he makes plans. He has this thought for the day, but didn't communicate it with me. And maybe there are things and expectations as a parent for my child that they need to take care of to do in order to have the privileges of whatever they want to do for the day sort of thing. And so it's challenging because I try to convey that message to my son, but then he's like, well, like I didn't know. I was like, likewise, I didn't know your plan either. I was like, so we must work together for this, like to get it done.
Yeah.
He's done really, really well. He'll like grit his teeth and just go for it, But that consistency is there. The other thing is schoolwork. For my son, having a class schedule is good, but there's a uniqueness about his education program that we have to look at. And right now we're moving to packets to complete some of his subject content. And I told him, I was like, this is what we'll do is once we get the packets, we're going to look at the amount of work and the amount of time left to accomplish it. That way what you have to do, amount of work every day to be able to get this done. I need to do a page and a half worth of work, okay? That worked gloriously last year with him. And it's just kind of keeping that on task because then he knows when he wakes up, that's part of his checklist of his vision for the day is, whether it's mastering rock bending or, going out with a friend or whatever it is, it's very structured.
Yeah. And that helps the autistic mind. It really, really does.
So the tip number 3 is help manage sensory sensitivities, being mindful of the environment. So the idea is to go like, surprise, we're going to take you to an EDM concert, just completely subject them to torture. And granted, you might like EDM. You might like, my son likes some really wild music.
Yeah.
It's very unique and strange. And for me, it's way too much. It's a lot of chaos. But I listen to hardcore metal, so it's really hard for me to say that something else is too much. Because mine, in most people's cases, they're like, can you turn that off? It hurts my head. But his is like an interesting chaos that I can't track. It's too much. And, it's just that idea of being aware of those moments or those things that I don't cook zucchini, or if I do, I set it on the side so that it's an option for him because I know that he's not going to want it. If it's even in a dish, he won't eat the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
one of my big triggers, and I have to make sure that these don't exist in any home I'm in, are ceiling fans.
Interesting.
Ceiling fans, the way that they make sound, there is no pattern, there is no repetition, it is utter chaos. And remember, to an autistic brain, it doesn't matter whether it is quiet or loud or how far away it is, all of it is the same as if it's right next to you. And so hearing that ceiling fan with its inconsistent noise is the most just jarring thing in the world to me.
Yeah.
Refrigerators do the same thing, but refrigerators are generally more consistent. But that ceiling fan, if there's a ceiling fan on anywhere in the home, it just, and we may be getting into triggers at some point, but noticing when someone is going to go toward that, they've been overstimulated or over-triggered, recognizing those is really important. One of mine is the stutter.
If you want to watch Joe trigger, we have an episode, ASMR, and it is the funniest episode on earth because I did all of the ASMR while I had the separate camera of Joe's reaction the entire time, and it is literally like, we could probably make a blooper reel of just Joe's reactions to everything. It is absolutely hilarious, so check that out. It's just giant letters ASMR for the episode, and it is just laughable watching that. It's good.
And you hear, so when I'm talking about the ceiling fans, when I start, I can start to hear that
It's affecting. Stop thinking about it, Joe.
And it affects me. And my daughters know that when they start hearing me stutter like that, that's a sign that my brain is no longer processing new information. It's starting to overload and shut down. And that's really important to recognize when someone's been overstimulated, because it then leads to other potential issues, and help them find a place where they can calm down, a nice dark room, no noise, headphones. There's a lot of different ways that you can help them. But recognizing those signs of when they're getting overstimulated is really important. And that's one thing that's for me. I don't know, if it's the same for other people who are autistic, or if there's a group of autistic people out there that have the same thing, but it's that stutter.
Yeah.
Is one of the big things. And so that's, you can start to see that in a lot of the communication when, I mean, even throughout this, there have been times when I'm thinking about these triggering moments where it's like, okay, I'm done processing and I can't do it anymore.
So one of the things that is, you said this, like putting headphones on or going into a dark room, you're kind of shutting down motor skills in order to do something, and what you're trying to do is eliminate exposure to information, which is hard. Like, a lot of this, like, I want to bring up our one of the things that we have is called neurowarrior.co, and it's essentially it's a mindfulness meditation technique that is, it's not just this simple process of just kind of calming down or box breathing exercises. Those are good, they're valuable, but in this case, this is more about neurohacking. So you're actually redeveloping and remapping parts or neural pathways within your mind to be able to train particular responses. It can be helpful for individuals with autism. However, on the other side of this is when you're talking about an autism, let's say, trigger, okay? Oftentimes, it's the elimination of sensory that is necessary in those moments. So often, like, you're not looking for a mindfulness app to do this. My son absolutely hates it. Why? Because the last thing he wants to do is listen to anybody out of the blue shout at him in his headphones about whatever he's supposed to be doing, breathing, considering, thinking about whatever, because his mind is thinking about 75,000 things right now, and what he needs to do is shut his eyes.
Yeah.
What he needs to do is put white noise filtering, noise canceling headphones on and just leave the headphones on. By the way, that is the most incredible feeling in the whole wide world. Just put noise canceling headphones on, nothing on it. Just silence. Like,
silence is golden.
I have a little chihuahua at home. I can't even hear her when I put those noise canceling headphones on. It is glorious. But it's oftentimes in those moments, sometimes just removing sensory that calms that down.
Yeah.
Maybe offering an option of trying to do some breathing exercise, but realistically it's that sort of stuff. So the last thing is what not to do. Okay, so we kind of mentioned some things about what you could maybe do in that sense, but what not to do. You're not trying to fix somebody. They're not broken. Okay?
Yeah.
It is part of an identity of who they are. It makes up their characteristics, and it's not a flaw. And so it's viewing them as broken or viewing them as a problem because of this is you're the problem. It's recognizing that how you help them is by applying and being sensitive to their needs, and making sure that the method in which you are operating with them is for them. You're encouraging them to improve certain things. So it may not be like raising my voice. No. It may be, making a suggestion rather than it being, a directive that changes course, because the last thing you want to do is change their routine.
Yeah, and it's things like when they get close to a meltdown or when they're overstimulated or any of these situations, it's by trying to tell them just stop doing that. that doesn't work, and that's damaging.
Yeah, tell them don't act like that, or you'll look autistic.
Yeah, I can't not. But recognizing that this is a part of who they are. One thing that I've done with my kids is we've written down what are my triggers, what are the issues that lead to that, so that we all know that we avoid those situations. If we can't avoid them, we know that, okay, there needs to be extra measures in place because we couldn't avoid this specific stressor. To now we need to be more mindful about the other stressors that are coming in, or dad needs time to relax and not do anything, needs time to be away from everyone, or things like that. And know that it's not a slight against someone. That's just an autistic person being autistic.
Yeah.
And being helpful, open, and loving to someone who's going through those kinds of things is so vital, and not trying to fix them, because there's nothing to fix.
Yeah, and even like when you talk about like kind of unplugging for a moment, like without autism, that's important. Okay?
Yeah.
You can't bring home your traffic jam and your busy work day and just lay it in the lap of everybody at your household. You have to be able to decompress. You have to have those moments where you're breathing in and breathing out, and then maybe doing that in the car before you walk in the door, sort of a thing, or whatever your routine is. Have that communicated so that you can have that moment. Putting noise canceling headphones on, it is beautiful. Okay, but maybe you don't have those, so shut the radio off in your car and just sit in silence, because in your car is pretty silent, okay? It's a good opportunity for you to just kind of be with your breathing,
And let them do that.
Yes, it's letting them do that. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not even, you're not trying to fix them, you're allowing them to continue to regulate. And it's the idea that if you think that you have to fix autism, it's like trying to get a dog to meow. It's just not going to happen. Yeah. Like, the most thing that's going to happen is everyone's just going to end up being confused and frustrated, And so rather than trying to think that autism is some sort of thing you need to put a Band-Aid over and continually try to, move away from, recognize that it's just, it is, it's there, it's part of who they are, and just like you would, just like you would customize the way that you talk to somebody else, maybe, or the way that you would communicate to a small child when they're having a conversation, or an older person, if you're having a conversation with them, you would make sure that you're sensitive to how they receive it, what you're talking to them. You're not going to talk to an older person like you're going to talk to a small child. They would get insulted by that. There's no difference in what we're talking about right here.
Yeah.
Don't tell them they're wrong. Like you mentioned, imposter syndrome, and basically it's kind of where trying to mask so much out of fear that they're broken, or out of fear that there's something wrong with them, that they end up having other issues, other mental issues because of it.
Yeah, and when autistic people are told you don't act autistic, or you don't look autistic, or you're not autistic,
yeah,
that creates a lot of issues around imposter syndrome, where it's like, okay, am I wrong? Is all this stuff? Am I really just crazy and I don't have autism? Is there something wrong with me other than this? I mean, it leads to so many other issues, where if you just accept someone that, yeah, they're autistic. Okay, great. I feel, one of the greatest things for me was, I mentioned earlier this new YouTube channel. I can't remember the name of it. We'll link it below, because I think they're great in the education here. But when I started watching that, and I felt validated and accepted, I watched their videos for like 4 or 5 hours when I found this channel.
That's cool.
And I actually started to cry, because I felt so validated.
Yeah.
That I am, yes, this is what I am doing, what I am feeling, this is autism.
You get me!
Yeah, exactly. And that validation is so important because imposter syndrome is very damaging, especially with autism. And so don't tell someone they don't look autistic or they don't act autistic, because they're probably high masking.
Well, I want to say that, like,
and there's no look to autism.
Right? Yeah. There's no. There's. It is part of them, and the other part of that, though, is like, obviously we talked about don't overwhelm them with things or spontaneous changes. And it's like this. If I want my son to do something like a task for the day, it drives him nuts, but he won't do it if I don't do it this way. If I say, hey, I made a list, it's upstairs on the counter, he won't look at the list. He won't actually do any of it, okay? Now, if I go and I'm leaving, I'm heading out the door, and I was like, hey, I need you to take care of this, and this, and then I get home and nothing's been done. Why? Because I said that before I left, okay? But if I say, hey, when you're awake, call me, okay? So he calls me. That's one job. You have one job. And if he doesn't call me, obviously I'll call him, okay? But then I'm like, okay, I want you to take care of this. He's like, is there anything else? I want you to take care of that, okay? Then he goes and does that. Okay, I did that. Okay, now I want you to take care of this. Okay, so I'm giving it to him in pieces. Why? Because if I invited him to 3 different events in the same day, that is madness in his mind, and he's gonna shut down, and then he's not gonna go to any of it.
Yeah.
So it's being considerate of the fact of overwhelming with too much data, and when he's already overwhelmed with that much information. So you might as well just give it one piece at a time. It's okay. It takes an extra 10 seconds. Don't worry about it. But then also in that, being mindful of their needs in that kind of capacity doesn't mean that they're fragile. Yeah. It's not like, oh, I'm dealing with this delicate little egg, and I got to be careful because it's so delicate and fragile, and oh my goodness, I can't break it. Well, no, but the reality is like, my son still has great conversations with me. He has opinions, and he can be argumentative, and all of the things that everyone else has. It's just, there are moments that I know I need to be respectful of how he receives things.
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, I work with a great guy. For those of you that know, I work at Domino's part-time. It's a great source for a lot of our videos. But one of the guys that I work with, he is autistic, kind of mid-functioning, needs some extra support, some extra resources, but he's the same way. I mean, he needs people to be very forceful with him so that he knows what he needs to do. If you're not very forceful with him, he won't do it. And there's a story that the manager there loves telling. He was being very forceful with this kid about, okay, you need to do this, you messed up on this, you need to correct this. For a lot of autistic people, we don't understand subtlety.
Right.
And I say a lot, you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person.
Yeah, okay? You can't beat around the bush with they're very literal.
In general, yeah. And so, he was being very forceful. Okay, you messed up here, you need to correct this. You messed up here, you need to correct this. And one of the customers that was in got mad at the manager for being so forceful with this employee, with this kid. And the manager shot back, no, I am doing exactly what he needs to be done. And that's exactly it, is, if you walk on eggshells around autistic people because you think they're fragile or sensitive or anything like that, they're probably missing what you're saying.
Absolutely.
And again, this isn't all people, we're talking generalities here. Again, you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. But in general, you need to be that forceful, you need to follow up with them, because that's what most autistic people prefer. We don't understand subtlety in general.
Right.
That's part of the social cues that we don't get. And so you need to be very straightforward. You need to be, and that sometimes that's forceful.
Well, a good example is my son. If I ask him to take the trash out, he will take trash out. He will take there are trash cans all over my house. So when I say take the trash out, I am implying the entire house. And he will take one room. And I'm like, what? Where did we miscommunicate here, okay? So I have to be intentional. I implied, yes. I have to be intentional and say, I need you to go through the house and take all of the trashes out, okay? Very intentional about wording because he will literally take trash out. And he's like, I did what you asked. I'm like, oh boy.
Yep, no, that's exactly it. And so, we're not, what'd you call them? Little
fragile eggs.
Fragile eggs. We're real people. Come on, treat us with that kind of respect.
So, guys, I think the importance is really about being patient, being consistent, and understanding in the process of this that it's not an exact science. I think I like that when you've met an autistic person, you've met one autistic person. You haven't met them all. They're very unique in different ways and absolutely beautiful ways. I think another thing to kind of point out in this is that autism isn't a defect. I want to use the word a superpower. Some people may not feel that way, and I'll disclaim it like this. I have a cousin of mine who won Miss Wheelchair Universe a number of years back, and she advocates for disabled individuals by not allowing them to say disabled, but using the word extra able, because the amount of things that she can do are that are things that we take for granted, like, oh yeah, like this, driving a car down the road. She has no arms or legs, so having the ability to drive her own vehicle and go out and about by herself is absolutely incredible to think or imagine. But yet she can, and that's way above and beyond normal human capacity. So yes, I believe that equates to a superpower. And my son can process things leaps and bounds faster than anyone else I know. Yes, I believe that's a superpower. And, it's a different, maybe even better way of experiencing the world when you think of it that way. I guess I've learned to look at it with an appreciation for how cool it is to be able to experience that, and have sympathy for, how intense that can be sometimes. But to just, I don't know, it's fascinating to me.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the problems with, people saying it's a superpower or things like that are because it's a way of other people to kind of put people with autism down. That's the way it's been expressed that way before. Oh, they're autistic. Oh, they've got a superpower. It's just that diminutive way of talking to someone with with autism, and so that's where maybe we're hypersensitive to those kinds of words because they've been used negatively against us. But I love the idea behind that because we see the world maybe differently than a neurotypical person, but it adds to our ability to be able to see the world in a different way.
Yeah.
Dead Poets Society is one of my favorite movies. And he has them stand up on the desk to see the world from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And that is so valuable to be able to move forward as a society. And so looking at us having a superpower in being able to see the world differently, I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. I think the term Neuro-Spicy, I think is
Neuro-Spicy.
Great. But we've got to take these things as, people who use them diminutively, we're just going to ignore them. And use the terms that we want to use. It's however you want to describe yourself, great. So long as you're not doing it to insult someone else. If you're neurotypical and you want to call someone, with autism that they have a superpower, great. As long as you're doing it the right way, I don't have a problem with it.
Well, we have reached the end of our show for today. Sorry, no dad joke time. But I want to say thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and life's too short. So keep laughing and learning, and remember, idiots have way more fun.
Check your shoes.